Welcome to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories, locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and Thisday Live begins now. Coming up in the next hour, after 5 days of silence, President Muhammadu Buhari breaks silence on the ongoing investigation of the suspended acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Ibrahim Magu. Could he be a victim of power play? What is next for Nigeria's foremost anti-corruption agency? And the latest on the global coronavirus pandemic as Nigeria makes a U-turn on the reopening of schools, even as domestic air travel resumes, and Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro tests positive to the virus. President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria yesterday broke his silence on the ongoing investigation of the suspended acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Ibrahim Magu. In a statement by his media aide, Garuba Shehu, President Buhari noted that a series of documented allegations were made against Magu. The statement came on the heels of a preliminary review of the allegations leveled against the EFCC boss and several other members of his staff. According to the presidency, there were grounds for a detailed investigation to be conducted. Magu's travels started early last week after a presidential investigative panel headed by former Appeal Court Justice Ayo Salami had invited him to appear before it to answer to 22 allegations of insubordination, graft, and mismanagement of recovered looted assets made against him and the EFCC. Since his interrogation started, Magu has remained in the custody of the Nigeria Police Force Criminal Investigation Department. In his absence, President Buhari has appointed the EFCC's head of operations and Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mohammed Umar, to act as the chairman of the commission. However, the latter's appointment has brought to the fore the penchant by government for appointing serving and ex-police officers to head the war against corruption commission. Many are of the view that the commission is in dire need of reforms, and his war against corruption must be repurposed by an appointee from outside the police force in order to achieve the desired objective. Here to discuss Magu's tenure as head of the EFCC, his ouster, and what needs to be done to reform the commission are two highly respected lawyers and senior advocates of Nigeria, Norrison Quakers and Owonikoko. Welcome to the program, Norrison Quakers and Owonikoko. Thank you for joining us on Thisday Live.
It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
Yes, good to have you with us. Very quickly, I would like to throw a question to both of you. There have been many perspectives on the Magu debacle. There are persons who say that this is a plus for the administration's war against corruption. And there are others who also insist that, look, this is a major minus to have the anti-corruption czar finding himself mad in allegations of misdeeds and corruption. What do you think? I'll start with you, Owonikoko, SAN.
Thank you. I think it's a mixed bag of reality, in the sense that it's rather unusual for a government in power to expose its anti-corruption czar that was appointed by it in circumstances that we are witnessing in the case of Mr. Magu. To that extent, government needs to be commended for the courage to face reality and then expose what it considers to be an aberration. On the other hand, it's also a negative when we look at the circumstances at which Mr. Magu emerged as the acting chairman of EFCC. I believe, Mr. President, in hindsight now, will probably appreciate why it was inauspicious not to have had a second look at the candidature of Magu after his own security agencies submitted a damning report which suggested that he was not fit for the office. So that's why I say it's a mixed bag. But the outcome itself now is a positive because it shows that government has the will to slam the hammer whenever, regardless of who is involved, and the optics, negative optics it might have on its people's perception in terms of fighting corruption. Thank you.
You agree that this is a case of who will watch the watchers, who will guard the guardians?
Oh, yes. I believe we lost a chance in 2018 when the NFIU Act was passed. If you look at it, one of the core mandates of EFCC originally under Section 1C was to have a department that was responsible for the financial intelligence unit, guarding of financial intelligence for economic crime, financial crimes, terrorism, money laundering. But by that act, that function was hived away from EFCC, and an independent body, chaired by its own director, domiciled inside Central Bank of Nigeria, was inaugurated. From that moment onwards, EFCC itself became one of the agencies that should be watched because it was going to be a repository of funds recovered in prosecuting and investigating financial crimes. I don't think that the operative of EFCC realized the fundamental change that happened, that they were now under an independent watch by the NFIU, which was by law supposed to be independent and operationally autonomous. That's a key word in the enactment under Section 5 or so. So clearly, that was a signal for EFCC itself to have been further restructured. Because NFI used to be one of the departments, but which was now hived off and made to be independent of EFCC.
Well, Norrison Quakers, SAN, are you with me? Can you hear me from the studio here?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, excellent.
Can hear you.
So I'd like to have your thoughts on some of the issues that have already been addressed by your brother SAN on the issue of Magu's investigation and interrogation and all that is going on at the EFCC at this moment.
Well, I totally agree with my brother, Owonikoko SAN, that is a mixed bag. But I'll go a step further, in the sense that when Magu was nominated for that office, he was indeed investigated. He was subjected to the State Security Service, DSS, which is a common thing. And I'm aware that you're also a former office holder, in the sense that nobody would be given the responsibility of governance without going through that scrutiny. I think it's called the integrity test. And I remember that when he appeared before the National Assembly for his confirmation hearing, he was told that the DSS had given a report that indicted him, and on account of that report, he was not fit to hold the office. Now, two words were used in the course of the hearing. One was that he had failed the integrity test. The other one that if he continues in office, he will be prejudicial to the government's posture in relation to his crusade against corruption. Now, what has changed from that time till this moment? If you recall, the government refused to accede to the legislative posture of the National Assembly that refused to confirm Magu, and the government decided to go on with him. Now, if his appointment had been confirmed, you recall that he has spent over 4 years. The Act provides only for 4 years. His tenure has even exceeded the tenure that he ought to have been in office. He's been in office now for about 5 years. Now, what is the aftermath of all of this? Now, some people are saying that it showcases the government's ability to fight corruption, even when it involves its officers. I totally disagree. This is something that has been long overdue. Why is it coming now? So I might not be disinclined to believing that indeed there is interplay of forces. Why is it coming now? The report had been there all this while. DSS is the agency empowered to scrutinize all political office holders, or would-be or prospective office holders. You're expected to be subject to that scrutiny, the integrity test, to find out your past, your present, things that you have done, your records. And once they are satisfied, you're given a clean bill of health. Now, if the agency that is given the responsibility had investigated him and had found him to lack integrity, why would the government insist on having him? Now, I remember the words of I think Senator Dino Melaye, who said that his continuous stay in office would do the government more harm than good. Now, to a large extent, that statement has come through. Has it not been vindicated? That the same man now is now being vilified, the same man now is now being hounded by the government that even engaged him. So to that extent, I'm not going to give the government a score. I'm not going to give the government a pass mark for what it has done now. This is something that it ought to have done before now. You recall that the government insisted that he will continue in acting capacity, that it's actually not bound to go by the finding of the National Assembly that refused to confirm him, that it is the president's prerogative to keep him in office, referring to Section 171. And I believe so strongly that this particular office does not come within the purview of Section 171. Well, so that's my take on this.
Norrison Quakers, I like the point you made about the interplay of forces. And I would like you to just word a little bit more on that. Are you saying that you agree with those persons who insist that this is a question of power play within the government? And will you go far to also comment on the allegation by Ibrahim Magu supporters that this may well be a case of corruption fighting back?
Well, it is not impossible. First, if I go by what we have read in the papers, that he's been accused of insubordination. Insubordination to who? Is it to the president or to the Attorney General of the Federation? And it was limited to the Attorney General of the Federation, that his conduct and act is seen as a direct affront on the office of the Attorney General. Now, when you look at the EFCC Act, who is he supposed to report to? Who supervises his powers? Beyond prosecutorial powers that the Attorney General possesses or that is vested in him, beyond that, there's nothing more. Magu does not report to the Attorney General's office only in terms of prosecution. There is also a board that is to monitor, control, direct, and give the commission some policy thrust. Now, was that board inaugurated? Is that board in existence? So there are a number of things that that strikes at one, and so to a large extent, I might not totally disagree that indeed there is some interplay of forces, because if the investigation has been orchestrated and engineered from the office of the Attorney General, and one of the allegations against him is act of insubordination. So if that is the case, so this is something that is playing now. Can I say that corruption is fighting back? I won't say that, because it's always been there. I won't say corruption is fighting back. But what I can see here is that perhaps Magu, as chairman of the EFCC, has stepped on some very eminent and powerful tools. And because he has refused to accede, perhaps this is what is playing out now. So I won't totally disagree that is an interplay of forces that is at work.
Well, Owonikoko SAN, let me come back to you. Well, Wahab Shitu, Esquire, counsel to Ibrahim Magu, has had to petition the investigating panel led by Justice Salami. And his grouse is that his client is being denied right to fair hearing, right to liberty, and that he has not even seen the terms of reference of the investigating panel. Witnesses have been interrogated behind his back without him being given opportunities to respond. But others say, well, this is karma. Why should the same EFCC chairman be raising these same allegations about his own case, whereas these are the major concerns of how the EFCC has operated in other cases? What do you think?
The machinery adopted by Mr. President to carry out this investigation is situated within a law. There is the Tribunal of Inquiry Act. The provisions of that act has been tested severally up to Supreme Court. And the upshot of those tests is that that body does not have compulsive powers. Its duty is to carry out a fact-finding mission by the appointer, which under our law is the president. And It can only make recommendations. Now, that is why under that law, for instance, there are two critical things that the court have upheld. Its proceedings are within its authority to be conducted discreetly, confidentially, because you don't want to out some of the findings that may turn out upon proper scrutiny in adjudication to be incorrect. Secondly, evidence generated from that proceeding is not admissible in a court of law. So that means also whoever is subject of investigation by the panel is not prejudiced. But if it is the candidate himself that is externalizing proceedings in that panel, then he will have himself to blame. With regards to the issue of liberty, that body is not a court of law. So if, for any reason, and it does not have a custodial power, based on how Supreme Court has interpreted its powers under the YEMI and Babangida, Part 808, Nigerian Weekly Law Report. So if, for any reason, you are detained beyond 48 hours, just like anybody that was there under Magu's EFCC, you have a right to approach the court to grant you bail pending whatever is investigation. I do not see why, rather than take that course, somebody will be petitioning a body that you know is supposed to carry out its function discreetly, confidentially, and not to engage with the public. And that's why they are not allowing the media inside. By the law that creates it. If you remember, the Okuta panel was considered under this law. It was Okuta panel's own decision to allow the public access. They could have conducted their panel investigation discreetly. But because of the political objective of that exercise, the Okuta panel ruled that the public will be granted access and the media will be granted access. So I do not see for now any infraction that is beyond what Magu's lawyer can seek redress in court of law. Especially in this COVID era, an application of that nature will be granted special dispensation to be heard, even virtually. So once it's been detained for more than 48 hours, he has a right to apply to the court to be granted bail without anything stopping what is going on. So I am at a loss as to how this should be the approach. When you now petition the panel is not allowed to externalize their proceedings. They're not supposed to engage the public. So what will they do? They have not said a single thing. We have not seen a single report of proceeding of that panel. So I cannot sit here in the public and begin to criticize what is going on there. And don't forget, the outcome of the proceedings there will not lead to any conviction. It may affect the right of a subject of investigation, but it will not prejudice, because if the test is that when they finish, somebody still has a decision to make whether to accept or not, you cannot claim that you have been prejudiced. And that is the more reason why every step in investigation up onto arraignment in court does not confer a right on a suspect to be talking about fair hearing. In the course of trial, issues that might have infringed his right in the course of investigation will also come into play, but they will be procedural, evidentiary. They will not have to do with the substantive question of whether somebody committed murder or somebody fleeced EFCC resources. So as far as I'm concerned, interestingly, it just occurred to me now, there is an irony about the chairman of that panel. Don't forget, one of the reasons that led to Justice Alami's removal was that there was an allegation by some people trying to influence him, saying that they facilitated his Senate confirmation to become president of the Court of Appeal. And they used that to blackmail him on end, which also led to his eventual suspension and restoration to be sworn to be eventually to allow to retire, with honor. So in this case, the reverse is the case. Somebody that ought not to be occupying a position because the law says you needed Senate confirmation, did not get it. He ended up spending 5 years on that position, and now he has, unfortunately, based on what is on ground, created grounds for people to begin to doubt whether he was fit for that office, and for his appointer to eventually resist all this pressure for the past 5 years, and then constitute a panel to review his case. I think it's a point of disappointment. I'm sure Mr. President will be ruined the day he probably defied the Senate in not looking wider to pick a chair for EFCC.
Well, Norrison Quakers, let me come to you. Do you concur with Owonikoko SAN on the question of the procedure adopted by the Salami panel and also the prayers placed before the panel by Wahab Shitu, counsel to Ibrahim Magu?
I totally agree with Owonikoko. But again, one thing that is also apparent is this. We operate, as it were, constitutional democracy. Now, the rights of Ibrahim Magu are enshrined in the Constitution. if that right has been infracted, it is not the panel's place to determine it. It is the court. So Mr. Wahab Shittu will approach the court to seek redress and not the panel. The panel does not have the right to look into it. Everything that Mr. Owonikoko said is backed up by law, and the law on this is also very clear. It's an administrative panel. It's a panel of inquiry. It does not enjoy judicial powers, neither does it enjoy quasi-judicial power. All that the panel is required to do or set up to do is to simply find out facts. In other words, a situation where the facts or allegations against him are established. And if these facts are established, who is the appointer? It is the president. Recommendation would then be made to the president for the president to take appropriate steps. But I will also go a step further. I think this particular president owes the National Assembly an apology. Now, if the National Assembly, through the instrumentality of the Directorate of State Service, had conducted investigation over 5 years ago to nip in the bud his nominee for the appointment of chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and he rebuffed it, and is coming back now, 5 years after, to trump up the same allegations to ask the incumbent to step aside. I think that is a disservice, and it is not honorable. And I think it's time the president apologizes even to the nation as well. Now, what's all the hue and cry after all these years? And then you turn around to say the very allegations that were made against him. Ask yourself this question: what has changed? It was the same allegation about abuse of office. It was the same allegation about corruption. If DSS at that time, an agency of government, had carried out its statutory powers and had investigated and had come up with a report of its finding, which was made available. Mind you, the National Assembly is actually the agency of the arm of government that is responsible for oversight function, and not even the president. When you look at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission Act, it is actually the National Assembly that is responsible to perform oversight functions, including approving funds, including submission of his audited report, etc. So if the National Assembly, in its wisdom, had exercised its statutory powers by forwarding the name of a nominee for investigation, and a report had come to them to say this man is not fit to occupy the office, and the government went ahead and engaged him, and then 5 years after, you're turning around to now use the same report, the same investigative report, to indict the same person. And so, mind you, the panel that has been set up is merely to verify the facts.
Well, before we go, I would like to ask both of you 2 questions, but I don't know how to combine the 2 within the short time that we have left. But quickly, let me start with you, Norrison Quakers. Some people have been saying that this has created a crisis of credibility for the EFCC, and that there is a need for reform of the EFCC. There is need for forensic audit, they say. If you agree, what kind of reform would you like to see?
First and foremost, I totally agree that the reform is long overdue. Now, the act in itself is not defective. It is the attitude and the occupants of the office. If you notice, from its inception to this moment, the commission had all kinds of crises of integrity, from Ribadu all the way to the current occupant of the office. Now, look at the requirement for the appointment of chairman. It says that it must be somebody who is exposed to law enforcement, and then must not be below the rank of an ACP, Assistant Commissioner of Police, in any of the enforcement agencies, including the police. Now, from inception to this moment, who are those that have been appointed so far? Police officers, serving police officers. And I think the time has come for us to critically look at the law with a view to ensuring that credible persons are appointed, not necessarily from within the ambit of the police force. It could also be somebody who is exposed to intelligence. Now, you could also appoint somebody who is from the military, or a retired military officer, or even a serving military officer to run. It could also be a private individual. So the act has to be amended. Again, like I always say, our greatest challenge is that we need to now develop institutions and not individuals. Because parallel is oftentimes being drawn. Oh, during the time of Nuhu Ribadu, this was what they did. During the time of Ibrahim Lamode, this was what they did. That era should go for forever. Okay. It should not be an institution that is independent and not built around an individual. So that's Quakers.
Quickly, let me take Owonikok's views on this particular subject.
Yes, I totally subscribe to the view that structurally, EFCC as it is now is a nondescript organization because its core power has been taken away by NFIU. So clearly, they have to redefine its objective. One of the areas I have observed that is causing problem for EFCC that makes people to complain is that there is supposed to be a demarcation between the prosecuting authority of EFCC and investigation authority of EFCC. But what they do is that they match together. The lawyers who are involved in investigation are the one prosecuting. So they lack that independence of judgment to know whether before they go to court, there is enough material. That has to be clearly clarified. Two, we must expand the base of appointment. Instead of us insisting, knowing now that the job of that agency is not limited to investigation, we must expand the base and also increase level of maturity and experience required for somebody that's going to head an agency of that nature. Thirdly, if you look at NFIU, a number of innovations were introduced to that act that address most of the concerns we have now. For instance, the director of NFIU cannot be removed except for cause unless you go to the Senate. You don't require that to remove EFCC chairman. The director of NFIU is supposed to be drawn from a plate including lawyers, people with experience in humanities and 15-year cognitive experience, including securities. So there is a lot you can pick from NFIU in reforming the EFCC. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, AJ Owonikoko, SAN.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Norrison Quakers, SAN, for joining us on Thisday Live, the Sunday Talk Show. We now take a short break now. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday Talk Show, here on the Arise News Channel. Joining me now in the studio are Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information Delta State. Chike Ogea, good to see you. Good to have you on the show this week. And Prof and YEMI, well, good to see you too. But Chike, let me start with you. You listened to the conversation we had with Owonikoko, SAN, and Norrison Quakers, SAN, on the Magu Dibeku. Now, what are your immediate thoughts? Do you think that, as the presidency has pointed out, this is a clear indication that there are no sacred cows in the government? Chike, can you hear me?
No, I can hardly hear you. I hardly heard you.
Well, I was asking for your thoughts on the Magu Dibeku, whether indeed this is an indication that there are no sacred cows in the Buhari administration, as has been alleged or indicated by the presidency. Okay, we don't have him yet. He's in another studio, but Yemi, let me start with you on the same question. Chike, I'll come back to you.
I'd say no, actually. I think it speaks more, as a previous guest was saying, really about the incompetence, I would say, about the administration. I mean, Mr. Magu, this will have been his 5th year as acting chairman. I think if, one, he was not confirmed, because the DSS, as Mr. Quaker said, has the statutory powers to investigate. They brought a report. The president chose to ignore it. Even though I think last year there was another panel that cleared him of allegations. And then you have this happening at this time. And I guess the point really is just that it was just unnecessary. I believe it was unnecessary to have a man what is it? Economy, security, and corruption were the 3 pillars for this administration. And the person you chose to head it was someone who your Secret Service says is not competent to do it, but you still went ahead. So signaling starting point for me was all shades of wrong in that regard. And then secondly, the fact that he's been dogged with all these rumors all along. And yes, it was cleared by the same AGF, cleared him sometime last year, 2 years ago. And then fast forward to this time around, you now have this set of allegations against him. So I don't think it's an issue of no sacred cows, because, I mean, At the same time, we're having a minister who was a former governor, who was a former senator, who's now a minister, Godswill Akpabio, being accused publicly by a former subordinate of one of his ministries, saying, accusing him of theft, corruption, and fraud. So I don't think the issue of sacred cows is an issue at all.
Well, Prof, what do you think? Do you think all this drama that we have witnessed in the past week, do you think that the drama is really necessary? Couldn't this have been done away from, the media, away from all the drama that has surrounded it?
I want to believe that Mr. President has an agenda that he understands, that the people of Nigeria do not understand. You asked the question as to whether we should be talking about sacred cows. There are sacred cows. There are sacred cows. And the sacred cows are being protected under political recklessness policy. And the reasons are not far-fetched. The guests, Owonikoko and the Quakers, have rightly pointed out to many of the reasons. One reason given, I think it was Quakers, he said the tenure, if he had even officially been confirmed, shouldn't have exceeded 4 years. He's more than, he has exceeded the tenure. He's done 5 years already. First problem. The second issue is that as at the time of appointment, it was discovered, the security agencies, the DSS, made it clear that there were allegations making him ineligible for consideration for appointment. Mr. President did not listen to that. Raising now a conflict between the right of Mr. President to appoint and the provision of coming up with an individual who has tainted record. So, Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari cannot come into the open saying he's fighting corruption on the one hand, and somebody who has been identified as corrupt, not having good records, and you are still presenting him. Now, after 5 years, and that raises the issue of some rumors going around to say, look, because we are talking about drama, why now? The two guests raised the issue, why now? Many people believe that it is an attempt to prevent Bola Tinubu from dreaming of a presidential ambition in 2023. Now, since we say it's a rumor, it's a trail all along, I want to argue that in answer to Quaker's question, why now? That one is one possible hypothesis to consider. So this drama is necessary at this point in time because Mr. President wants to disabuse the mind of the Nigerian people who are accusing him of not being very faithful to what he's preaching. And now in an attempt to give the impression that he's fighting tooth and nail corruption, we need this type of drama to make people believe.
Well, Prof, on that note, let me go to Chike Ogea. Chike, can you hear me in the studio where you are?
Yes, I can now.
Oh, clearly. Okay, how much damage do you think all of this has done to the credibility of the EFCC? And do you consider it a good development or an unfortunate development?
Definitely very unfortunate. Because, excuse me, just like Prof was saying, and my two brothers, the Leonard Silk, that both were here earlier on, it's obvious that we already had something that was tainted. Why was that insistence on taking it forward? It is the same government that appointed Magu as the chairman of the EFCC. It is the same government agency of the of the DSS that had provided those two conflicting reports. But be that as it may, even once there was one of the reports which had, raised the red flag and questioned the integrity of Magu, there and then, for a government that prides itself as one of its cardinal points being the anti-corruption fight, it should have definitely have made a new appointment. I mean, in a country of 200 million people, we can't say only Magu is qualified to do so. That raises a lot of other questions. I begin to wonder, why is the EFCC chairman position reserved for a certain part of this country? Are there no other people from other parts of Nigeria that can do that work? Or are they saying there are no non-corrupt people from those other parts? You know, a lot of things keep going on. And, well, God has a way of playing a joke on people when, you know, you just want to keep perpetuating this kind of injustices on people. Usually you end up having murk on your face. Because just like one brilliant young man I saw you interview over the week, I think his name was Pharaoh Timi or so, said, don't die in their war, it's their war. All we are seeing now is the war of Malami and Magu. That is all what we are seeing now. Something went wrong between them. If whatever went wrong between them did not go wrong, we wouldn't be seeing all of this. So like the young man said, you know, I have decided to choose my own war. Definitely we all will die. And I better die in my war than in their petty wars. That's the truth.
Well, do you want to respond to the point, the new dimension that he has brought to the conversation about ethnicity? Why should all chairmen of the EFCC come from just one part of the country? And I think that there are many Nigerians who also think, look, that position should be opened up. The horizon for the leadership of that agency should be widened. Prof, I start with you.
I don't think we need to look for any answer to that question. Because I raised earlier the conflict between the right of Mr. President to appoint whoever he feels. All right? This same president of ours told us the other time that he prefers to appoint people he knows. And it's not a function of whether you are competent, whether you meet the qualification all along. He determines what criteria to apply in appointing whoever he wants. Secondly, when, for instance, under Bukola Saraki as a Senate president, when the Senate refused to approve, you know, the nomination of this same Magu, the president said, okay, look, why go with the idea of substantive appointment? And now he left that, okay, let him be acting. Meaning now that, as we have always argued, Mr. President doesn't believe actually in the rule of law. So all these things we are now talking about, to say why should he appoint anybody from whatever region, from the same region, then we must address the right given to Mr. President to appoint anybody he so desires, whether he's from the south, even if he's from a village. Most unfortunately, nobody thinks about my village. So,
well, Yemi, there was something that Prof alluded to, which I think Norrison Quakers, SAN, also brought up, which is the fact that the National Assembly has been vindicated and that Mr. President owes the National Assembly an apology on the Magu question. Do you share that view?
I do agree that they've been vindicated. I mean, I'm not a fan of the National Assembly, but on this matter, I mean, they didn't want to approve him. Approve his appointment, and I do agree. But I just wanted to speak on the sort of Malami Magu angle, and I think it is very significant that the Attorney General of the Federation, he himself needs to be investigated. We've said it on the show here, I think 2 weeks ago. You are swearing in members of the APC in federal chambers. He's been obstructive in terms of or incompetent in his handling of the P&I deal, the Malabu scandal. So there are issues with his own handling of things relating to the state as well. And so this whole framing around Magu and his own allegations, it's not, you don't have two relatively clean hands people fighting each other. And this is an administration that's committed to fighting corruption. That's very, very unfortunate.
That apology is necessary in any way. That time, the Senate...
Well, Chike, do you agree with Prof and Yemi on that?
About the apology, you mean?
Yes, about how the National Assembly may have been vindicated.
Oh, certainly. And if you remember, it was the 8th National Assembly
lost this one.
which is not even there anymore. But more significantly and more importantly, I think the government owes the Nigerian people that apology. Not even more than the National Assembly. It's the Nigerian people they owe that apology. And, you know, like I keep saying, posterity is going to be there to judge it all.
Well, you know, on that note, we'll take another short break here on Thisday Live, this Sunday talk show. When we return, the program will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Thisday Live, this Sunday talk show. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State. Well, let's take another major subject of interest in Nigeria. Last Wednesday, the Nigerian government reversed itself on the reopening of schools for graduating students when it arrived at the conclusion that they were not safe for reopening after all. Obviously alarmed that the COVID-19 infections were still not under control, the government thought it better to err on the side of caution. The implication of this is that students in their final year in secondary schools will not write their exams organized by the West African Examinations Council, WAEC, as previously announced. Despite the decision to keep schools closed, the plan to resume domestic air travel went ahead unimpeded. Flights between Lagos and Abuja resumed last week, while flights from the Kano, Owerri, Maiduguri, and Port Harcourt airports resumed at the weekend with little or no incident. Meanwhile, outside Nigeria, the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 worldwide rose to 12.5 million on Saturday, with the United States accounting for about a quarter of that tally. United States President Donald Trump, for the first time, even wore a face mask in public. Brazil comes next after the United States, with the second highest number of infections, which included the country's President Jair Bolsonaro, who confirmed that he had tested positive to the virus. Prior to his announcement, Bolsonaro had for months downplayed the risks of the disease, calling it the little flu. Here in Nigeria, a total number of 664 new cases were announced by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, taking the country's tally to 31,987 cases. Lagos remains the epicenter for the infection, topping the charts with 12,275 cases. That's like an update on COVID-19, both in Nigeria and internationally. Chike, I would like to start with you. I'm sure there's an aspect of that COVID-19 update that will interest you, which is the resumption of flights in Lagos Airport, Abuja Airport, and some other airports in the country. I know that aviation is part of your areas of expertise. What's your assessment as someone who is on the ground in that industry?
Yeah, definitely, because our industry obviously has been one of the most highly impacted by this pandemic. But be that as it may, I'm sure Nigerians appreciate the fact that that decision to resume flights and all of that was a purely economic decision. It wasn't a decision that was informed by the statistics or what was going on with our health situation, or it wasn't anything to do with the pandemic. Because, like we all know, we have not even peaked in Nigeria yet. In fact, I spoke to a very, very learned professional in the medical field who says to me that these next few weeks are possibly going to be the most critical weeks in terms of the infections we should be expecting. Over this period of time, I'm sure it's in the public domain, both public figures, people we know, family, friends, so many of them have lost their lives to this COVID, especially, if you have an underlying ailment. I mean, once again, like everybody knows, everybody's time will come. But what seems to happen is that COVID seems to be fast-tracking a lot of deaths. So be that as it may, there are still those issues with it. Yes, from the standpoint of my business, I am happy, that, we could start work again and we could start earning some money. And I'm sure all the workers that work in my company and other related companies in the aviation industry will be very happy because they have been asked to go home. Many of them had taken pay cuts and all of that because there was absolutely no activity in the airport in the last 4 months. But the truth is this. Yes, I have been to the airport. I have seen what what FAN especially has done in the Lagos airport, because I'm confined to Lagos. I can't go anywhere else. And it's a lot of work. I must commend FAN. But then I still have worries about what goes on aboard the airport. I mean, aboard the aircraft. That's right. I heard my brother Ado Sanusi in an interview, I think on Channel, somewhere last week or so, saying once a passenger sneezes on board, he will be confined immediately. I mean, is that what air travel wants to become? Because in that case, maybe nobody's going to even travel again. So the minute you cough, or the minute you sneeze anywhere in an aircraft, then there's going to be pandemonium or what? So you see, these are the things we need to work out so that while trying to get this whole thing together, we don't, ruffle feathers. I'm sure internationally as well, because flights internationally in most parts of the world have not even really begun. I'm thinking that maybe sometime in August or, towards the end of August, maybe international flights will begin. So I want to know how these things will be done, especially in the configurations of the seating arrangements in the aircrafts, like I said earlier on. Because from what I have seen, the few flights that have traveled, that have taken off between Abuja and Lagos and maybe Port Harcourt these few days, I still see a situation of, people being, I don't see that aisle seats and those middle seats being vacated and all of that, like they said. Because if they do that, that comes with a cost. The airplane is not going to fly below cost, because once that starts happening, then we are going to start having safety issues.
Quite correct. But let me come to Yemi. Yemi, you've always talked about the importance of leadership in this fight against COVID-19. And now we have, for the first time, President Trump wearing a mask in public when he visited a hospital, a military hospital in suburban Washington, D.C. And then in Brazil, you have Jair Bolsonaro coming down with, COVID-19. And the two countries are on top of the chart with regard to COVID-19. Are you happy that at last President Trump has seen the light?
I'm not quite sure how much of light he's seen, but I think it is important, and I think the signaling is significant. For those who are paying attention, for a man who's been dismissive all along, way much earlier, the Center for Disease Control has encouraged American citizens to wear masks, and the president of the country blatantly refused to. So I think that is significant. And the same thing with Bolsonaro as well. But locally, and I think to our point about significance, President Buhari has failed to wear a mask in any of the visits or any of the clips that we've seen with him receiving guests as well. So on this side of the pond, we're still behind. But the point that she came making about the airline, I think is quite significant. In another conversation, the Minister of Aviation has said the air, it's pressurized, blah, blah, blah. The airplane is very safe. But I worry myself around that.
At your own risk.
Exactly, as it were, really. And I worry about that because if we're dealing in a country where people are not taking this seriously, there's one thing for you to have a scientific analysis around the safety of the airline. But if all people see are pictures, so you have pictures of a packed aircraft, you have pictures of the Attorney General of the Federation's son getting married, and people not observing any social distancing, people spraying money. And so when you have leaders constantly communicating that, and the optics and the visuals that we see is that, it doesn't send a strong message that we have a pandemic that we're fighting, and that continues to be unfortunate.
Well, quickly, before we close this for today, I would like Prof to comment on the education issue, the decision, the vote for us on the resumption of schools. Do you think that the Minister of Education has acted wisely?
I love the minister at this particular time because he's now making Nigerians believe that the future of Nigeria can be bright when wisdom, knowledge, experience is allowed to prevail. He did say it is better to miss 1 year, all right, and then have life than, losing the lives of our children to school. The second point is
and
that...
teachers as well.
And teachers. I think we are making haste to die slowly with this issue of aviation. Donald Trump, as you raised his own case in the context of what we are discussing, he decided to wear the face mask because he's going to the hospital, now knowing that, look, hospitals can be the terra cognita for this virus. So you see, this time they are now beginning to see more clearly. Leadership, as you asked YEMI, and she has given us the appropriate explanation. Our problem in Nigeria is leadership. It's leadership.
Well, but the key message is taking responsibility in the face of COVID-19, because COVID-19 is no respecter of persons or status or class. On that note, you've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next Sunday.